Welcome to our LSR Live community. I'm your host, Scott Ritsema, for this episode of Living Springs Retreat Live. I am very glad to be with each one of you. I know a lot of you catch this in the archive after the event, and that is just wonderful. And those who are here at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central on Wednesday, we're going to interact in the chat. We've got a special guest. We're going to talk today about kidney health and how important that is and how we can protect our kidneys and even bring the healing hand of Jesus into our lives in our kidney health. So our guest is going to be Ashwin Sukumaran from Uchee Pines. He'll tell you more about what is Uchee Pines. That's going to be a very special treat because it's close to my family's heart. We've become good friends with Ashwin and with Uchee Pines. But first things first, we've got a big event coming up. Living Springs, when we talk about Living Springs Retreat Live, like this is a live, event on the cyber platform. But this is an in-person event that's coming up. We're talking February 4th through 8th. You can register at that QR code right there. I believe that's the QR code that takes you to the live in-person registration. There's another QR code that will come up, I believe, shortly that will take you to the virtual registration. And what's so special about this event? Well, you see it on the screen. Everybody's friend of LSR, Barbara O'Neill, will be our special featured speaker again. But this time it's not at the Living Springs Retreat campus. It's in an off-site place that can accommodate a larger number of people to register and come and meet Barbara and meet the whole LSR team. And we're going to have a great time together. And those who can't come to Ringgold, Georgia in person to be a part of the Barbara O'Neill seminar, New Year, New You, do register for the virtual event because then you can be a part of it. There's going to be Q&A every day. There's the online one. You can participate in the Q&A remotely from the other side of the world. Just like you do during LSR Live, like this episode. So, by the way, you can start loading up your questions about kidney stuff in the chat right now. But also, what makes this all possible, I've got to hold these in my hand once again. And I want to give you guys a really strong disclaimer on that one, the sinus. I want to remind, I know I've said this 100 times. If you've heard this, just spread the word because it's painful if you don't get this right. This has iodine. We also have a version without iodine in it if you don't want to mess with that. But shake this thing, okay? Because the iodine can settle and you need it properly diluted in order to take that up into the sinuses and have protection during these. I mean, everything is going around like the worst flus. And I'm just praising God that I am here with you healthy. Because it goes through family, you're around it with friends, at church, you name it. And I always just keep the throat coated with that. This is tasty. This is not like, this one, make sure to shake it and even spray it a couple of times. If it's been sitting around for a while, let's give it a couple of sprays, then go up the nose with it after you've shaken it. And the iodine and the rosemary, I wanted to just quick read something. One of you guys wrote this. You said, good product. I use it as a throat spray and as a nasal spray. So Revita Living over there at the LSR store. And then one of you wrote this. Rosemary is good for memory, right? I only knew that the rosemary had pinene in it. Pinene is the stuff that is in the pine needles, and the fragrance of the air in a pine forest actually increases your immunity. So we're big fans of pine and pinene and rosemary. But somebody said, one product does it all. I have to be frugal. So they get, well, it's actually two, I guess, but they get the pair of those. And I just wanted to run that by the community. And maybe I'll ask my guests that later. We're talking about kidneys, but rosemary is good for the memory. That's the first time I've heard that. I don't know. Maybe I forgot. Maybe I need to take more of the stuff. Anyway, let's introduce our guest, Ashwin Sukumaran, featured speaker with Uchee Pines and a resident health and healing expert as the Lord has led him into healing ministry. Ashwin, can you first just tell us what is Uchee Pines? It's kind of a sister institute with LSR, very similar in the same state in Alabama. Tell us about Uchee Pines.
Yeah, hey Scott, it's good to be here, and I'm really excited because yes, it's true. Uchee Pines and Living Springs Retreat are sister institutions. We're actually only a couple hours away from each other, so every now and then we share resources. So it's really exciting to work together in this way as well. Uchee Pines Institute has been around since around 1969, around 1969, 1970. It was founded by doctors Calvin and Agatha Thrash, which many people would have known. Back in their day, they were, well, they were physicians. She was a pathologist and he was internal medicine, and they were atheists. And as they individually had an experience with the Lord, they came to Jesus and they became Seventh-day Adventist Christians, and they took all their brilliance in medicine and threw it full force into medical missionary work. And so they uh, acquired this land that we're on down here in Seal, Alabama. And now 50 some years later, we're still going by God's grace. So we have our lifestyle center. We have a medical missionary training school, the Center for Medical Missionary Training, and we have a health food store and plant-based restaurant in Columbus, Georgia, which is the second largest city in Georgia after Atlanta. And that is kind of our center of influence there in the city of Columbus. What my role is here at Uchee Pines, I'm the administrator of the Lifestyle Center, and I'm on the medical staff as well, as you mentioned. And so it's been really a blessing to be a part of this and to see miracles every session. You know, we're in the middle of a session right now. We have a group of patients here, and which will wrap up next week, and we're already seeing some amazing things.
Oh, praise God. And my family's experienced it, as you know, and as I said earlier. And, I was thinking about your wonderful walk, the hike around the property that
Yeah,
the
the
Lord
perimeter
has given
trail.
to you. Oh, the perimeter trail and the pine. And, you don't have to answer my weird question about rosemary, but I just do love Uchee Pines, and your lifestyle center. What a ministry that you are, just like Living Springs. People come and they learn not just how to get well, but how to stay well, right?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the pinines, because that's as it sounds like you're familiar with the concept of forest bathing. I don't know if
Yeah,
it looks like my screen froze here. Sorry, but
that's all right. We
okay, but
see
you can
you.
still hear me. All right.
Yep, yep.
So you're probably familiar with the concept of forest bathing, and you mentioned the pinines. There's a whole category of these plant chemicals that interact with our human anatomy and physiology called phytoncides, and that's what we smell in the trees around us in nature, and we get immune benefits from it. I haven't heard about the thing with rosemary being good for memory specifically, but that's interesting, and I wonder if it has to do with some of its anti-inflammatory properties. That'd be an interesting thing to study.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm always on the move. So I don't like bathe. I walk through, so I hope I'm getting the same benefits when I hike through the forest. Maybe you're getting even more benefits when you hike through the forest. But I was paraphrasing a moment ago somebody that I know you and I both admire, and in a lot of ways, he kind of went astray later in life. But when he was the great health reformer of the late 19th century, it was John Harvey Kellogg that
Hmm.
said, we want to have a place that people can come to learn, to get well and to learn to stay well. And they called it a sanitarium, like sanitation, learning proper dietary and lifestyle practices. And I know you've studied a little bit of the history there of that Battle Creek Sanitarium and that John Harvey Kellogg. How was he able to? People would remark and say, you're 5 years ahead of medical science. How do you do it? And has Uchee Pines kind of taken a little bit of their pattern after that original model of John Harvey Kellogg?
Yeah, that's that's always been fascinating to me. Dr. Kellogg was arguably the greatest physician of his day. I mean, major clients came from all over the world, some of them being people like Henry Ford and others. And I mean, it's pretty amazing. And so Dr. Kellogg was not I mean, he was a heavy hitter in medicine, and he was talking with Dr. Paulson a little bit. I believe it was Paulson, and he was asking this question: how do you, uh, how is it that we stayed 5 years ahead in modern medicine? And what he did was he said, I took my knowledge of the testimonies, and I look at what modern medicine, modern research has come up with, and if it lines up with what he believed to be the inspired word of God, then I would advertise it and do it. And if it didn't line up with the inspired word of God, then I would just kind of throw it out and not bother with it. And while the rest of the physicians around the world are trying this and trying that, he says, I already have a 5 years start on them. And it's interesting because a lot of the stuff that he was doing are things that are still very relevant today. I mean, Kellogg was always trying all kinds of things, but the foundational things was lifestyle medicine essentially. And interestingly, I actually opened a pathophysiology book a few years ago when I was studying, and right there in the first chapter, it talked about how before people used to actually go to these centers, these sanitariums, as you mentioned, and they would go for treatment of their illnesses. And what happened when, or why did people start going away from that? Well, they went away from that at the discovery of penicillin, which is interesting.
Hmm.
And so, so in line with, and you're absolutely right. It's unfortunate that Dr. Kellogg kind of went away from the truth at some point, but he did have his peak of his medical career, and we kind of follow that same pattern of saying, you know what, let's look at what science has to offer. We want to keep it scientific. I believe that God is a God of true science, and He is the designer of the human anatomy and physiology. And so when He says to do something, it makes sense to do it. You know, like if you're the manufacturer of your car says that you have to put gasoline, this type of gasoline in it, or this type of fuel in it, it only makes sense to do what the designer says because they know what it's built to do. And so I kind of see it the same way. And at Uchee Pines, we've been trying to follow that model of you know.
Oh, we just lost him, didn't we, Jeremy? Boy, following true science and making sure that it is always consistent with God's word. I'm guessing and assuming that was the wrapping up thought there. We'll confirm that when we get Ashwin back. Oh, we got him back.
All right.
You said following true science and making.
Right. So we want to follow true science, and we want to follow the word of God, So finding out what does God think is best, and whenever God says it's best, there's science for it. And oftentimes God has revealed things even way ahead of medicine discovering that it's true. In the 1800s, there were doctors prescribing strychnine and arsenic, and encouraging people to smoke and drink, and the Lord revealed that those things are not best. And now, of course, we have the science behind that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I learned through this experience that it's always good to trust in the Lord, and I'm excited to live in this time where we have lots of research, and we can we can follow it and see good results.
Yeah, absolutely. When they start saying things that are contrary to the consensus of the science, meaning a group of people who kind of are an echo chamber, that's not actual science, right? Science is a method by which you validate a hypothesis or invalidate a hypothesis at least, and you pursue truth through observation and through testing. So that's actual science. But when a Kellogg comes out, or an Agatha Thrash, or somebody who is cutting edge with actual the latest reality that we're discovering on how to treat disease, prevent disease, the mainstream often ridicules them, right? You're a quack, this is crazy. But if those people are Bible based, then it's going to be validated. And then that's how Kellogg was 5 years ahead of his time, right? I mean, that's amazing. And God's word is really vindicated in that regard. And Kellogg was a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, like you guys at Uchee Pines, right?
Right.
So when you mentioned the testimonies, there were actual visions that were given in that community, in that movement, through a servant of the Lord named Ellen G. White. She would go into vision and see these things and then communicate them. And then all of a sudden, all the science people are like, Kellogg, you're listening to this lady who's having visions. And then how do you do it? How do you stay 5 years ahead of time? He's like, well, I base it on the Bible, and these visions are helpful. And by the way, if that's the first time folks have heard that, you would of course not get into some sort of unbiblical narrative or unscientific narrative. If somebody comes like, I've seen something, I got a word from the Lord, and that can get out of hand and get crazy. So always be skeptical with that, but test the spirits and see if they are of the Lord. Send me
That's
an
right.
email. I'll send you videos on Bible prophecy, including the prophetic gift in the Church of God in the last days. Scott Ritsema at gmail.com. As always, if you're interested in Bible topics, but we're talking kidney topics today, right? So, can you give us a little intro to? I mean, maybe some listeners don't know what the kidneys do. Tell us about the urinary system and one of these wonderful. We're so fearfully and wonderfully made. God gave us waste removal and cleansing systems and detoxing systems. So, introduce us to the urinary system and the kidneys, and then we'll discuss how to keep them healthy after that.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, what we're gonna probably get into more is the aspect of chronic kidney disease. That's the one that's really prevalent. Matter of fact, it's a progressive condition that affects around 10% of the general global population. So that's a lot of people that are affected
Wow.
by chronic kidney disease. And it's one of the leading causes of mortality worldwide. And it's one of a small number of non communicable diseases that have shown an increase in associated deaths over the past 20 years. So this is a big issue. And we want to, we just want to help people to become aware that there are ways to help, right? And in a non-toxic, simple, natural way. So first of all, the urinary tract, and I'm not a nephrologist or anything like that, but this is just regular clinical anatomy and physiology that you can read about and understand for yourself. We want to keep it simple. That's my policy. So we have the kidneys, right? What are your kidneys? Your kidneys are these two bean-shaped organs about the size of the fist. They're located just below the rib cage, one on each side of your spine, so it's more towards your back. And healthy kidneys filter about half a cup of uh, blood every minute, and the whole purpose of the kidneys is to remove wastes and extra water and to make urine. So it's filtering your blood and helping to regulate different things, right? So you have your kidneys up here, and actually it's interesting. A lot of your organs are about the size of your fist. Even your stomach is about the size of your fist. And when you eat and you're full, it's about the size of two fists, right? So if you look at the plate and look at your fist, you have an idea of how much needs to go in, right? So your the blood is filtered there, and it goes. There's these collecting ducts, the ureters, where essentially what comes out of the kidneys, the product is urine, and that goes through the ureters down to the this stretchy pouch which we all know of called the bladder, right? And that bladder is lined with stretch receptors, and at some point it begins to stretch, and it gets to a point where those stretch receptors sends a signal through the nerves that basically tells you that familiar feeling that I have to go to the bathroom, right? I need to urinate, and then a response is sent that causes uh, the bladder to contract, and it causes other muscles to relax and allow the outflow of urine from the bladder through the urethra to the atmosphere. And so uh, this is a very important part of your body, because the kidneys, they, as I mentioned before, they remove waste and extra fluid for the body, and they remove acids as well. and it helps to regulate certain things like sodium, like calcium, like phosphorus, like potassium, right? And without the balance of these things, your cells may not work properly. Like, I mean, if your potassium goes too high, it will kill you. Your heart will stop, right? So your kidneys are constantly regulating these things for you so that you can have a pretty normal function. And your kidneys also make hormones that control your blood pressure and that help to stimulate the bone marrow to make red blood cells. And it helps with things that will help keep your bones healthy and strong and those kind of things. So the kidneys are really important. And I find it interesting because, there was a time when I was in college and I actually believed in evolution during this time. And it was actually the more that I studied the health sciences that I became more and more convinced that it was impossible for humans to have evolved.
Hmm.
Because how many millions of years will it take for humans to evolve or to grow and to procreate and for them to survive with let's say their intestines and their stomach and their mouth and everything, but with no kidneys? And I started thinking that, like, if evolution is randomized processes, how can that be? Because you have to have your heart and your lungs there simultaneously. This concept of irreducible complexity. These things must be present simultaneously, properly functioning for there to be good health. And when I realized you can't really live without your kidneys, you can't really live without your liver, you can't live without your heart, you can't live without your lungs, you can't live without your brain, and these things have to be, you know, functioning together. They work in concert. And so that's, anyway, that's maybe a little bit of a tangent, but it got me thinking, and especially when you see kidneys, and of course modern medicine has really come a long way in being able to help people who have declining uh, kidney function, but nobody can live without their kidneys, right?
Yeah.
So that is really interesting. So if we zoom in to the kidney, and I don't know if, do you think it's possible for me to share my screen? Maybe I can show a picture or
Yeah,
something.
you should be able to do that while you're looking for it. Because if I'm in your shoes, I can't multitask. Like, don't make me talk while I'm clicking. But you mentioned that. Oh, you said that maybe that's a tangent, and I would say no. Actually, and I know you believe this. You're just being humble. It is the core central truth of everything that we are doing to recognize that there is a creator and a designer, and there are laws by which he has designed us and to thrive. So if we don't operate according to those laws of nature that are God's laws that he created, then you end up with disease. And so you come into harmony with God's methods of living and life. Like you said, you wouldn't survive without all these organs that all spontaneously came into being. So I think we do have your slide. Oh, maybe not.
Yeah,
But
I was,
okay, let me throw out another stat if you want to keep working on it.
no,
You
go
mentioned
ahead, but I'm not going to
10%.
share it. So go ahead.
Okay, okay. Well, yeah, I want to hear more from you, but just quick stat. 15% of Americans have kidney disease. I just learned. You mentioned
Yeah, that's a lot.
10% globally. It's even worse in America. So are these is this another lifestyle disease like heart disease and diabetes and all this and the way we're eating? And I want to hear from you how do you talk to people about kidney disease in your ministry?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we look at the kidneys themselves, right? So you have blood that flows, your heart pumps, and you have your arteries that come out, branch off of your aorta, and you have unfiltered blood that goes to your kidneys, right? So the artery goes to your kidney, and it branches off into smaller and smaller and smaller arteries, and it reaches these tiny little uh, filtering units, right? So it reaches the nephrons, right? And you have uh, the what's called the glomeruli. The glomeruli is basically a network of blood vessels, and there are small openings that kind of act like a sieve, and there's there are things that can pass through the blood vessels in and out of there, so that whatever needs to go out of blood goes out of the blood. Whatever needs to stay in the blood stays in the blood, right? And so these little filters, there's a few steps in this, and basically the end result is what goes through, passes through these blood vessels, ends up in what's called the tubules, and then it goes into the ureters, right? And the filtered blood returns back into your general circulation through uh, the renal vein, right? Now, you have a million of these filtering units, these nephrons, and basically, uh, I mean, you have to understand your kidneys are at work constantly. I mean, in a single day, your kidneys filter about 150 quarts of blood. That's a lot, right? I mean, here
Hmm.
I'll show you my. This is my water bottle, one of them anyway. So this is my water bottle. This is only 4 quarts. This is a gallon, and if you think about it, your kidneys are filtering day and night, and it filters about 150 quarts, and only 1 or 2 quarts becomes urine, more or less, depending on if it's a child or whatever, right? Um, and so anything that compromises this process of the blood going in and being filtered on this tiny microvascular level, anything that compromises the kidney's ability to take things out or leave things in, that is essentially what we call kidney disease, chronic kidney disease. It can be acute or chronic, but definitely we're going to focus on the chronic aspect, right? Now, chronic kidney disease, it's usually caused by other conditions that put a strain on the kidneys. And usually there's no symptoms until things get worse. So someone might notice edema in the legs, tiredness, or even proteinuria. So when you go to urinate, you might find lots of bubbles. When I say that, I don't mean we're all adults here, right? So we're talking about urine hitting the water. It's not just uh, regular the regular bubbles, but excess bubble like frothiness, foaminess. If you see a lot of bubbles, that is a sign that you could have high protein in the urine, and that could be a sign that CKD has begun, or that at least the kidneys have been compromised in some way. So you mentioned something earlier. You asked the question, is this a lifestyle thing? And um, for some people, you know, we know that the kidneys decline in function as we age, of course, but for many people, it is in fact a lifestyle issue. And we know this because one of the highest risk factors for chronic kidney disease is hypertension, high blood pressure. Does that sound like a
Hmm.
lifestyle issue?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and why? Because over time, those the when the pressure is high, hypertension, high tension, high pressure inside the blood vessels. I think of those long balloons that you see, people at the carnival or something. They inflate those long balloons and they make like a dog or something. Well, imagine if you filled one of those long balloons with water. That's kind of what your blood vessels are like, your arteries, and they stretch to accommodate a certain amount. But at some point, when you fill them with too much and there's too much pressure inside, eventually that balloon is going to rupture, right? And the same thing can happen on a microvascular level when you have high tension, high pressure. uh, there tends to be microvascular damage, which can happen in the tiny blood vessels of the kidneys. So high blood pressure, which is definitely a lifestyle issue, that increases the risk for chronic kidney disease or damage to the kidneys. What about diabetes? Well, that's the other risk factor. Diabetes, too much glucose in your blood can lead to damage in your in the tiny filters of the kidneys, right? Is that a lifestyle issue? It
Oh
absolutely
yeah.
is. Yeah, I mean, And those are probably just those two things alone are keeping a lot of our lifestyle centers open. Just the fact that people are dealing with high blood pressure and diabetes, and it's become such a normal part of life, especially here in North America and in most Western countries. It's a big issue, right? Um, the next major factor for kidney disease, or the major risk, is high cholesterol, and that's a lifestyle issue too. So if
Mm-hmm.
you have buildup of fatty deposits in the renal artery that's supplying the blood to be filtered by the kidneys, well, that compromise of circulation will also lead to kidney damage, right? So, I mean, you can go on and on for a number of things that can cause the decline in kidney function. Oh, another one, by the way, is long-term regular use of certain medications like lithium or the NSAIDs. That's an interesting one, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, which a lot of people use for pain, right? For pain and inflammation, and um, and those things will damage the the well, it will lead to damage of the kidneys and decline in kidney function. The NSAIDs especially will uh, lead to lower prostaglandins, which will lead to uh, a change in the blood vessels around the glomeruli that can have issues. And even with diabetes, people who have high blood sugar, it's actually interesting that the high sugars will lead to a compromise in the kidneys, and um, it leads to a constriction in the what's called the efferent vessel that comes out of the glomeruli, and um, and that will actually cause an increase in pressure in the glomeruli themselves, in the filtering units, and over time, that high pressure in that area will cause damage. And traditionally, what doctors will often prescribe are ARBs or ACE inhibitors or whatever, which will help to reduce that pressure in that area. But it's not dealing with the cause. The cause is the blood sugar is too high. It's a lifestyle issue still, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go through multiple different risks for developing chronic kidney disease, but it's just interesting that a lot of them, the overwhelming majority of them, are definitely lifestyle factors. Yeah.
So can kidney disease be reversed? I mean, we got tens of millions of people who have it, most of which probably don't even realize they have it. So what can we all do to have lifestyle choices that are protective of our kidneys to reduce that disease risk? And then if we happen to have kidney disease, are those lifestyle factors actually going to reverse kidney disease?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Uchee Pines, I've been here a little over 10 and a half years. And in that time, I've seen a number of people um, who have been in different stages. And matter of fact, let me just explain the staging real quick when it comes to kidney disease, and I'll answer that question. Um, so stage one is when you have kidney damage with normal or increased GFR. What is GFR? GFR stands for glomerular filtration rate. So it's the rate at which your kidneys are filtering the blood and making urine, right? And the higher the number, the better. So there are a few blood tests that you want to look for: the BUN, blood urea nitrogen, which is a waste product; your creatinine, which is a byproduct of the breakdown of protein, and that's probably the most important uh, lab value to look at. And then there's that calculation of the GFR that's based on the creatinine. So, like I said, the higher the GFR, the better. The lower the GFR, the more, well, it indicates that the kidneys are more compromised, right? So stage two, where the GFR is in the 60s to 80s. Stage 3A, is 45 to 59. Stage 3B is 30 to 44. Stage 4 is 15 to 29. And if it drops below 15, then that's considered stage 5, and stage 5 is considered kidney failure. So all the stages prior to that are not considered failure. It's considered, kidney disease for sure, with from mild to severe reduction in GFR. And so a lot of people will have stage 1 or stage 2 and be completely normal. The issue is they're probably not hydrating well, or there's some, lifestyle factor that could be adjusted. Um, Over my time at Uchee Pines, I've seen stage 3 completely reverse. And this is just an anecdote.
Wow.
I'm not claiming anything here, but just sharing some of our observations. We've seen stage 3 completely reverse. We've seen stage 4 improve into stage 3. So that's, that was a good improvement. And I've yet to see stage 5 completely reverse. However, we have seen people, because once you get to stage 5, your doctor is, well, actually, once you get to stage 4, your doctor is now talking about dialysis, right? So what is dialysis? It's basically replacing the function of the kidney with a machine. So blood goes out, it filters it and brings it back in, and it is a very annoying process. The person has to go and sit there for hours, and sometimes they have to do it 3-4 times a week, depending on how bad things are. And so we've seen people with stage 5 who are on dialysis, and after going through our program here, after they were doing dialysis maybe 3 times a week, and then they were able to back off of the frequency of dialysis to do it maybe once every week or once every other week. So that's a tremendous improvement.
Mm-hmm.
We've also had a number of people who came with stage 5, and I wish they would have come. I wish many of them would have come sooner, before it had gotten this bad, because they probably would have had a better chance of recovering. But we've seen people with stage 5 who have not started dialysis yet, but who went onto the program, and they basically delayed it for much longer than it would have if they did anything else. And if they went on to dialysis, it was very infrequent. It wasn't, it wasn't multiple times a week. It was maybe once every other week or something. So either way, I say that going through some of the things we're going to talk about is beneficial. It's beneficial either way.
Yeah. Well, and you had stage 4 people who would be put on dialysis who hadn't yet moved to 3. And you had 3.
Stage 5. It would have been stage 5 on dialysis. Yeah.
Well, did you also say that they will put you on dialysis at 4?
No. So at stage
Okay.
4, they will be prepping you for dialysis.
Oh, I got you.
Because they're anticipating the decline to stage 5. I should have been more clear with that.
Well, what I was getting at is, at the stage that they are going to their doctor having the dialysis conversation, you're expecting the degradation, and we're prepping it. At
Basically.
that very stage, 4, you're seeing somebody reverse to 3.
Yeah.
That shows what God's methods offer to this world, where we just, it's inevitable. You're going to drop to 5, and we're going to go through the routine and cut and paste that protocol. And we're just going, let's rethink this. And you guys have done that. And I know you didn't reinvent the wheel here. This has been something that's been ongoing in the lifestyle medicine community. It's the fastest growing area of medicine right now for a reason, right?
Yes,
so you guys
absolutely.
have been at that. I mean, you were definitely ahead of the curve. 1969. That's amazing. So you said we're going to talk about some things. I want to hear about, what are these lifestyle factors that you guys are applying, and you're doing it in a short period of time, right?
Relatively,
if somebody was to apply what they're doing with you for 9 months, what kind of results are you going to see? You're going to see astounding results over a longer period of time, right?
Absolutely.
So tell us about some of those. I'm really curious to hear what you say about diet, because you mentioned some of the protein excesses, and I'm thinking, okay, does that mean, too much protein, consumption of animal flesh? Is that going to be a higher risk factor for kidney disease? But then you also mentioned glucose in the blood, and are people going to say, well, then you shouldn't be eating the carbs and the sweet fruit, and that's a risk for kidney disease? So I'm baiting you to go on to the diet debate wars that go on between those who want the low carb and those who promote more of a whole plant food, experience like LSR and I believe Uchee Pines. But I'll let you speak to that and others, not just diets. It's got to be the whole picture, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a there's a tendency and a temptation to go into extremes, when you're dealing with a very challenging um, health concern, and we want big results, and so we tend to lean towards extremes. But a lot of it is actually very simple. It does take a little tailoring, but it's very doable that anyone can do at home. You don't necessarily have to go to a lifestyle center to implement some of these things. That's the nice thing. Now, many times, the main diet that people would recommend for kidney disease, and I'm not a dietitian or anything, but many would probably agree that they tend to recommend uh, a low protein diet. Nothing wrong with that. A low potassium diet, a low phosphorus diet. So these are things that are in the conversation when it comes to kidney disease. And that's interesting because what we promote is the plant-based diet, which is naturally high in potassium. So, so how do we reconcile that? How can we recommend something that is actually high potassium and could be problematic for kidney disease? Well, let's look at it. So, for as far as nutrition, okay, so something we have to note is that some of the hallmarks of uh, kidney disease is scar tissue formation. So you have the initial injury to the kidneys. There's microvascular damage. There's all kinds of things going on, and what comes after that is inflammation and scar tissue formation, and that's a major hallmark of chronic kidney disease. And so, what we want to do is, of course, do something that's anti-inflammatory and that overall will lower the risk. So we mentioned earlier the things that are high risk that will cause the initial insult to the injuries are the high blood pressure, the diabetes, the high cholesterol, or if you're taking certain medications or whatever. So getting those things under control is really the first major step, right? So eliminating those risk factors, improving them as much as possible, right? Now we can branch off into that, but maybe we'll just talk a little bit about the kidneys directly. Then we can talk about how we can resolve some of the other uh, causes, let's say, right? So what we want to do is we want a diet that is anti-inflammatory, right? Because inflammation after the injury is what will drive this development of scar tissue and the decline of kidney function. So there is really only one really true anti-inflammatory diet, which is the plant-based diet, right? And and in times past, it was often thought that the plant-based diet would not be beneficial for people with chronic kidney disease, like as mentioned, because of the high potassium, right? But if we look at it, there was a study. Uh, there were several studies actually. I wanted to share my screen, but I was having some trouble with uh, with just isolating the presentation. But anyway, what they're finding in some of these studies, and they're published in the Clinical Journal of the American Society of Nephrology, where they looked at plant-based diets and incident CKD, and they find that there's an inverse association between plant protein intake and risk of incident CKD. So in other words, when people are eating a plant-based diet or they're eating plant proteins, their risk of chronic kidney disease goes down, which is interesting. There was another study, and this was looking at. Now, this was actually a very interesting study, Scott. You might find this interesting, where they looked at a healthy plant-based diet versus a pro-vegetarian diet versus a less healthy plant-based diet,
Hmm.
and they found that people who are eating uh, the healthy plant-based diet had the lowest incident of CKD, followed by the overall plant-based diet, followed by the pro-vegetarian diet, and then they finally had the less healthy plant-based diet. So that would include things, a lot of processed foods and things like that. And that had actually the highest incident of uh, chronic kidney disease or CKD, even above the regular vegetarian diet, which is very interesting. So it definitely seems to be that eating a healthy, whole foods, plant-based diet is beneficial to protect the kidneys. That much is clear from um, the modern research. And
So lay
and then
off the vegan junk food.
right,
Eat the whole
exactly,
plants.
exactly.
Hi, I'm Scott. I'm a recovering vegan junk food addict. Now I just love, yeah, like soybeans. Thanks, Jeremy. Real actual food in its full fiber form.
Yeah,
What a
yeah,
novel idea. It doesn't have to be some counterfeit food, some invented manufactured food product. It's like
yeah,
let's eat beans, let's eat grains, fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds. Oh, it's all so good for you. And
yeah.
it's
The
tasty.
closer it
You got to learn
is,
how to cook. You got to eat from the Uchee Pines cooks or the LSR cooks. Then you'll learn how to enjoy it, or just get their cookbooks. There are cookbooks in the LSR store. But yeah, carry on.
yeah, definitely got to visit Living Springs, and then while you're at it, just come down 2 hours away and visit Uchee Pines and try the food. And yeah, we'd love to have you. And yeah, the closer it is to its natural form, the better. Generally, that's a just general rule. If it says it's made of carrots and it looks like a carrot, that's probably good, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so the other thing, of course, the eating a low protein diet is not difficult on the plant based diet. Um, you can get lots of proteins. All your essentially amino acids are all found in the plant world. You can get complete proteins on a plant based diet, contrary to what a lot of people think. But you you don't have to work very hard to have a low protein diet. But what you do want to look at is phosphorus as well, right? And what we find, there's a article uh, on PubMed. PubMed ID is 305-2214. Oh, sorry, no, it's 211-83586 is the PubMed ID. And it talks about a vegetarian compared with meat dietary protein source and phosphorus homeostasis. And what they find is that basically people who ate a pure vegetarian diet versus a pure meat diet had overall lower phosphorus levels, serum phosphorus levels, which is interesting. Um, so definitely eating a whole foods plant-based diet will lower your risk of CKD. It is easier to have phosphorus homeostasis in patients with CKD. So that just leaves one major thing from the dietary standpoint, which is the potassium, right? So
Mhm.
um, that's a big question area. What do you do with if you're recommending a plant-based diet, which is naturally a high potassium diet, and it's true, it is, but you can actually help to because normally you eat lots of green leafy vegetables and stuff which has lots of potassium in it, and your kidneys regulate that so that it's not going too high in your bloodstream. Well, you can still regulate it, you just do it before it goes into your mouth, that's all. So selecting some of the foods that are uh, lower in potassium, some of the plant foods, so you can probably get things like asparagus and cauliflower and celery, broccoli, uh, blueberries, lemons, limes, pears, grapes, things like that, apples. So they do have some potassium, but they'll have, like, let's say up to 200 milligrams per serving. So it's generally considered fairly low potassium. As long as you're not overdoing it on those things, it would be just fine. You know.
Uh, can you name any foods that somebody with kidney disease that you recommend they avoid? You named so many. It's like, wow, you can eat pretty much anything. You don't have to really worry about it. But are there a couple that you're like, you know what, that's a little high on potassium. Just hold off on that till we get this reversed.
Yeah, absolutely. So probably the famous food for potassium is bananas, right? So you don't want to eat, things like that. The bananas or even white potatoes tend to be high in potassium. You could leach the potassium out of it by boiling it. There's different methods to lower even the potassium from a high potassium food like that. But you want to stay away from things like that. I wouldn't say completely stay away from the green leafy vegetables, but you do want to eat some of those, but you don't want to eat exclusively that, where all you're getting is lots and lots of potassium. But generally, the berries are good. um, and you know, and you can always Google, just look up what are high potassium foods, and there's lots of lists. The list that I was just sharing from was something that uh, one of the one of my colleagues who worked at the Mayo Clinic had shared with me. So those are some of the uh, good foods there that you could eat.
Well, that's great. And you're saying this just to those with kidney disease. It's not like most listeners are going to now lay off of the bananas, but
Right.
if you're in that situation for a time, but there's more than just diet, right? I mean, I don't mean to cut you off if you have more to say about diet, but you mentioned earlier people are just underhydrated sometimes, and that's showing up in their chart in their lab blood work, their labs as their kidneys aren't liking that situation too much. So give us more that we can do to reverse and protect kidneys.
Yeah, absolutely. So it almost sounds like police: serve and protect, right? So yeah, so there's the definitely from a dietary standpoint, you want to be careful. And as you mentioned, this is not something that necessarily applies to everyone. And I would say work with your doctor. I'm just a guy in the screen, but you can work with your provider, or if you don't have a provider who is well versed in lifestyle medicine, we'd love to work with you here at Uchee Pines, and any of our sister institutions, I'm sure, would be very good at helping with this. You can use some other things in connection with the diet. The diet is one major part, but it's not the only thing. You can use some herbs as well. So some of the herbs that tend to be beneficial are things like corn silk, buchu, uva ursi. This tends to have a diuretic effect, which helps to expel uh, urine, right? Or it helps the person to basically urinate more. Um, there's also a supplement called berberine, which you can find in barberry, and berberine is interesting because um, it's actually been studied for diabetes, and they found that it's even comparable to metformin, which is a very commonly prescribed anti-diabetes medication. And but they tried looking at berberine for kidney disease, and they find that berberine actually ameliorates chronic kidney disease by inhibiting the production of some of the gut-derived uremic toxins. So, in other words, there's some of the bacteria that produce certain products, and what berberine does is it helps with reducing those toxins that would be in the gut. So berberine seems to help um, with chronic kidney disease, especially. But there are other things too. So it's not just diet and herbs and supplements, but exercise. Now this is
Hmm.
interesting because when as I mentioned, one of the markers for kidney disease is your creatinine, and creatinine is the byproduct of the breakdown of protein. So some guys who are like out there pumping iron and stuff like that, you're going to be breaking down protein. So there's always this question of should I exercise? Is it safe to exercise when you have kidney disease? Um, there was an article published in 2019. Exercise therapy improves GFR and reduces blood pressure and BMI in non-dialysis CKD patients. And they did this meta-analysis, and they found that exercise therapy actually helps by modifying lipid metabolism. So in other words, it will help with lowering fats, and that will overall help improve kidney function and BMI as well. So, and this was, by the way, in patients with stage 3 and stage 4 of CKD. So this is moderate to severe kidney disease was helped by actually just doing exercise, right? And we're not talking about very intense, but just moderate exercise, right? So something like walking, brisk walking, things like that is very beneficial. You mentioned water intake. Here's another article from NIH. Well, it was published on PubMed. Water intake and progression of chronic kidney disease. So they did a cohort study here, And they found that in patients with CKD, the relation between plain water intake and progression to kidney failure is U-shaped because both low and high intake is not beneficial. In other words, if you drink too much water, it's problematic. But if you don't drink enough water, it's problematic, right? So I don't know if you noticed this, but there's this underlying theme of temperance
Mm-hmm.
that's underscoring this whole thing,
Avoiding
and
extremes.
that's right, avoiding the extremes. Satan doesn't care if you're upstream or downstream as long as you're extreme, right? So we don't want to go into extremes, but definitely it would be good to know how much water you're supposed to drink. So a good way of
Right.
knowing that is take your body weight in pounds. I speak as an American, right? In pounds, divide that number by two, and that number in ounces is how much water you should be drinking generally. And you'd have to adjust that if you're doing, activity that will cause you to sweat a lot, or if you're sick and losing fluids, that all that needs to be adjusted. But generally, that's a good way of knowing
If it's hot
how.
out,
What's that?
or if it's hot out.
Yeah, if it's hot out and you're sweating a lot, you may have to adjust that a little bit. Or if you're doing hydrotherapy treatments or something, that's it's good to adjust that. Um, So another thing that can be beneficial is sunshine. Sunshine. And because something we get from the sun are UVB rays, which interact with the receptors on the skin to make this hormone called vitamin D. And it's interesting that they call it a vitamin. I looked into that. Why do they call it vitamin D? Because structurally, it's a corticosteroid, which is a hormone. And that's why, and it's so involved with our immune system and so many things. But they call it vitamin D because they add it to our food. They enrich our food with it, therefore it's a vitamin.
That's a
So
marketing term.
yeah, it's a market. That's exactly right. It's marketing. It's got nothing to do with the structure of the thing. I mean, it's technically it's a hormone, and it's interesting that vitamin D. Uh, so patients with CKD have an exceptionally high rate of severe vitamin D deficiency.
Huh.
And so that's interesting. And if you think about it, most lifestyle diseases are associated with vitamin D deficiencies. I mean,
Yeah.
many of the cancers, autoimmune diseases, um, obesity, diabetes, a lot of them are definitely associated with vitamin D deficiencies. So, um, and I'll share, I guess, a couple more, and then we can move forward from there. But there was another article published in the Clinical Journal of the American Society of Nephrology, and this was a connection I was not expecting to find, I'll be honest with you. But it talks about air pollution and kidney disease.
Hmm.
And I don't understand all the mechanisms as to why they don't really go into that, but they looked at several large epidemiological studies that suggested that this ambient fine particulate matter of a certain size was actually associated with increased risk of CKD.
Hmm.
And that type of pollution is the type of pollution that you find in city environments, which is very interesting. So one of the things we could do is get out of a city, move into a more of a country environment, or if you can't do that, at least regularly get outside. And we were talking about forest bathing earlier. Regularly go for a hike or go camping, or get out of the crowded areas, right, and go into the more natural environments. Um, I'll share a couple more. There's one on so we talked about nutrition, that plant-based nutrition, whole food plant-based nutrition is beneficial uh, for kidney function. Exercise, moderate exercise is beneficial for people with moderate to severe kidney disease. Water, getting the right amount of water is helpful. Sunshine, fresh air. We have this underlying theme of temperance. Um, and what about rest? So, in the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine, they did a cohort study, and they looked at sleep and the risk of chronic kidney disease. And this one kind of slapped me around a little bit. It said patients who slept for fewer than 4 hours or more than 8 hours had an increased risk of incident CKD compared to those who slept 6 to 8 hours. So getting too little sleep or too much sleep had a similar risk, which is very
Hmm.
interesting.
That's fascinating. You know, Ashwin, I just was looking up what are the greatest risk factors for for disease risk and early death. And not surprising, smoking, obesity, alcohol. I think everybody probably knows those are the top three. But what I was really surprised by is regular sleep deprivation, where you're consistently getting less than 6 hours of sleep, is in the top five.
Yeah.
And being sedentary is number five. So kidney disease is one of those that you're increasing the risk for when you're not getting enough sleep.
That's right. Yeah, and these are all very basic lifestyle principles, and matter of fact, regarding the sleep quality, that same study looked at it. Participants who fell asleep but awoke easily, or had difficulty falling asleep, or used sleeping pills or sedatives, had a higher risk of incident CKD compared to those who slept well. So it's not just the
Interesting.
number of hours you sleep, but the quality of sleep also matters when it comes to
And you
kidney
get
disease.
quality sleep by, light in the morning, pitch black at night, light supper or no supper at all,
Right.
cool temperatures, no noise. You get
Getting
your
rid of these things.
exactly. You're preaching to the choir on that, as you know, doing the media on the
I'm
brain
in the choir
seminars.
with
But
you. Yeah, that's right.
yeah, exactly. And that's part of the protocol, isn't it? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
you're treating people by helping them with every lifestyle factor. In fact, I want to say hi to some folks because Jeremy started bringing them up. But I think probably the thing that's closest to your heart and your strongest passion is going to be the last one, even more so than the dietary changes and everything. So, folks, stay tuned. But we're going to say hi to some people, and then we're going to ask Ashwin about stress and spiritual health and how that impacts our physical health. But hello to JM. And JM asks, where do you register? I think, Jeremy, she's probably talking about, or he, that one, about the Barbara O'Neill seminar. You register right there at the QR code. That's for the in-person experience, February 4 to 8 with Barbara O'Neill. And it's open seating at the meals, by the way. You can grab a seat next to Barbara, and you may not because there's going to be a lot of people there, but it'll be good to get together as a community, get to know each other. So thank you, Jeremy, for that QR code. I'm always talking to the producer in the background. JM says thank you. All right. Who else can we say hi to real quick, Jeremy? And then we can do some Q&A. We have a few minutes. Andrea also wants to sign up for the event. Jeremy, do the virtual one this time. Do the virtual one because Andrea just saw the one that you just did with the in-person. Show the QR code, please, Jeremy, for the virtual online seminar. I am assuming that is it. So if not, Jeremy, let me know. I think folks will know once they scan it and go over there. Be like, oh yeah, this is for the virtual experience. You'll find out when you get there if that's the right code for that. So thank you to Andrea and to JM for reminding us of that important event coming up just in a few weeks, like a couple weeks from now. Eve says, yes, rosemary is excellent for memory recall. It's excellent to use for studying if you smell it prior to learning something. And then also when you're trying to retrieve that information, it helps. Fascinating. I might start applying that one in my homeschool, see if it helps. Kawenda says, hello, Kawenda J from Hogansville, Georgia. What is the name of the plant-based restaurant in Columbus? Ashwin, what is the name of that?
It's called Country Life Health Food Store and Plant-Based Restaurant. But you can just type in Country Life, Columbus, Georgia. It'll come up. It's on Eberhart Avenue, right across from the Aflac building.
I've eaten there. It's good.
Yeah.
Who's next, Jeremy? Seeker of Truth questions. I recently read while doing research that low progesterone could be a contributing factor to anxiety. So we're off the kidney topic here, but I know that you guys, I know, Ashwin, this is literally what I was about to take you to. So why don't you talk about stress, anxiety, some of those mental health things, spiritual health things. How do you help people with anxiety, depression, and so on? And then talk about how that relates to physical health and kidney disease.
All right. Yeah. Excellent. So really one of the other articles I was going to mention is there's an article published in PubMed again called Stress and the Kidney. And they looked at the effects of stress on the kidneys and stress in fact can lead to CKD, and often it's through mechanisms involving hypertension and diabetes, but and because of the sympathetic nervous system that responds. When we're stressed, our blood pressure goes up, our blood sugar goes up. There is even this thing called stress hypercholesterolemia, where your body produces more cholesterol in response to stress. Your inflammatory markers go up. Stress really does have a big impact on our health. And I saw a while ago you had Mark Sandoval on here. I'm sure you probably touched on some of the mind things as well. He's a good friend of mine, and there's one thing we know in medicine, that stress makes things worse. Generally. Matter of fact, there's there's an article that talks about the uh, the effects of acute versus chronic stress on the immune system. And acute stress tends to actually stimulate the immune system, help in a good way. Like exercise, for example, is an acute form of stress in a good way. But chronic stress, according to this article, actually dysregulates the innate and adaptive immune responses. It changes the cytokine balance and suppresses immunity by decreasing the leukocyte number, the white cell count. It decreases the movement of those white cells and the function of the white cells. So when we're stressed, our immune system physically responds to that. It is dysregulated, and oftentimes disease is the result. I can't tell you how many, patients have come through Uchee Pines who developed cancer after they found out someone was unfaithful in a marriage, or the death of a loved one, or something very traumatic happens in their life. Others who have various autoimmune conditions that have some extremely stressful, tragic things in their history as well. And I'm not saying that's a rule for everyone, but so please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But it definitely is an interesting observation, where a lot of people who develop chronic inflammatory conditions often have a very serious stressor attached to it. Um, and and these white cells, by the way, which are malfunctioning, or not doing their job as they should, some people estimate, now this is slightly off topic, we mentioned cancer. Uh, some estimate that often uh, many people develop a cancer cell or so in their lifetime. It's estimated that like at least 40 or something percent. I gotta check that number, but so don't quote me on that. But there's some percentage of that they think that people will develop a cancer cell at some point in their lifetime, and and the immune system keeps it in check, so we never see it, develop into the full blown disease. And so when someone is having a really stressful situation, and the immune system is now dysregulated and it's weakened, anything could happen. People tend to get sick. They Not just with like cancer, but I mean, you can see someone as simple as something like a cold sore. You've seen, someone with a cold sore, it comes out when they're stressed, and the immune system is at a weak point. So I thought about this, and where do the immune cells come from in the body? Well, the immune cells, your white blood cells, are made in your bone marrow of your long bones. So in your femur, and um, and other places, wherever you have that squishy bone marrow, that's where your red cells and platelets and your white cells are produced.
You just made me think of a Bible verse. I'm not stealing your thunder. I'm gonna zip it.
All right, all right. Well, I mean, you could say it if you want. It comes from Proverbs.
A merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth up the bones.
That's it. That's it. God knows what He's talking about. So you can see somebody who has truly been in a stressful situation, and what causes those stressful situations. A lot of times, and this brings me to my last point on the kidney disease subject, which is trust in God as a remedy. Because oftentimes we are stressed because of something that we can't control. The Bible tells in Philippians 4:6, be careful or be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God, right? And then it says, and the peace of God, which passes all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. That's a supernatural peace. We've been talking about natural remedies. Well, this is a supernatural remedy, if you will. And it's a peace that comes when the average person would not have peace. And the only way you can have that is because we're not trusting in ourselves. We're trusting in someone higher than ourselves, right? Who has the power over our circumstances. And I love the fact that God will never betray your confidence. When you come to him, um, Jesus said, if anyone comes to me, any man who comes to me, I will no wise cast out, right?
Oh, amen.
So, everyone who came to Jesus was helped if they let him, you know? And so many times we're struggling with things and we feel the burden of it because we can't control it. But what if God had the control over it and he had your best interest in mind and he welcomes us to place it in his hands, believing that he can do better for that situation than we would be able to do if we could control it.
Oh,
You know,
Ashwin, that is so good. That was the most important part of this live stream. I'm maybe I'm cutting you off, but I'm just like, that's it. You just made me feel, or the Spirit of God just made me feel like I do when I read Steps to Christ.
amen.
The best-selling Christian devotional book ever. It's the second best-selling Christian nonfiction book ever.
Oh
Send me
yeah.
an email. I'm going to get you that book. I actually just recorded videos of me just reading that text, and that's it. Like, I have nothing to say that's better than what's in here in this book. It's just Bible verse after Bible verse, all this encouraging stuff like you just said. And Scott Ritsema at gmail.com. I want to send you guys that 13 chapters that are life-changing, that you will recognize your value to God and what he's done to draw you to him. You will see he is for you, not against you. And I think that's the most important thing that I can ever say is what Ashwin is on here with, the spiritual health. That's healing of my condition spiritually, not just physically, that brings eternal life.
Amen.
And the eternal kind of life starts now when you know and feel that love of your Father in heaven. And just like you said, you can go to him with your burdens. And he's not this grumpy. I mean, false religion has mischaracterized and portrayed a false picture of God's character. Get to know him for yourself, not on how you've seen Christians behave or historical events that were really of the devil. The Bible calls that Antichrist. So you got me preaching, Ashwin. Did I cut you off, or should we go to the next people on here?
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. QT Wime says, by the way, you guys see my new glasses? I can read your names a little better now. Now I have no excuse if I mispronounce any of them. Agatha Thrash treated my grandfather at Uchee Pines many years ago. He lived a very healthy life after he and my grandmother left. I am so blessed to have found my way to Living Springs. Oh, what a blessing it is to have you with us. Who's next, Jeremy? Lucy says, when is the next retreat that I can attend? Jeremy, you're going to have to help me with that. This is the next Living Springs, not the live event February 4 to 8, I'm guessing you're asking, Lucy, but the next retreat at Living Springs. Jeremy, if you can get something up on the screen for that. I can also ask Ashwin, how do people go for the program at Uchee Pines? These are not in competition. These are sisters.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's no competition. We are. I am thrilled to recommend Living Springs. Matter of fact, we as I mentioned earlier, we send our staff there all the time to help out. I sent my little sister there to help out recently. So yeah, it's a good place to be. I need to visit myself to see the folks there, but it's definitely a blessing. And if anyone's interested in coming to Uchee Pines, you can go to ucheepines.org. I see that Jeremy's got the QR code there. You can go to Uchee Pines, UCHEEPINES.org. If you're interested in coming for a lifestyle session, we do have medical providers on our staff. We can do blood work on site, and usually our sessions are about 17 days long. So you come in at the beginning, we do a little welcome meeting. You get your blood work, history and physical, meet the doctor, and all that stuff in the beginning. And then you get a lifestyle counselor assigned to you who walks you through the program. So we'll help you with fulfilling whatever the doctor's recommending as far as the diet or exercise or herbs or supplements or whatever. There's educational classes during the day, disease talks, cooking classes, stress management classes, and so forth. Um, and then in the afternoon, various treatments depending on the prescription. And we do blood work at the end, and we're just excited to see what God is doing. So we'd love to work with you, or if there's someone who you know who could benefit from coming through. We'd love to work with you, whether it's here or whether it's Living Springs. I believe that the Spirit of God is in the business of working in both places.
Absolutely. Well, we got 5 minutes. We can take a couple more shout outs there to Gratitude, who sends shalom, and we appreciate that. And back to you. We like your name. See, that's the opposite of stress, is gratitude. You replace the fear with praise of what the gift of life God has given to you. Jeremy, who else do we want to say hi to or answer any questions? I missed the start. Is Ashwin allopathic trained? Yeah, what's your background? What got you into this natural approach?
Yeah, so my background is in lifestyle medicine. I am not an allopathic physician, but we do what's called lifestyle medicine, and that's our scope here, where we do mostly education. You know, we have people come in and we teach them about what to do. You know, we can educate about the effects of drug medications or about poor lifestyle or whatever, and teach people uh, how they can improve by making some simple changes. So I didn't want to talk too much about myself. I do have a some traditional background before I got into this, but I don't want to focus on that because this has really been my passion, is in lifestyle medicine. So,
Amen. Amen. Turmeric. Turmeric is amazing. Now it's missing an R though. See, I can see really well. I'm gonna be watching you guys. It's not turmeric, it's turmeric. Thanks. It is amazing. Niche says, I was told I have inflammation in my kidney. Okay, what can help this this friend of ours, Ashwin, with the kidney inflammation?
so yeah. So just from a practical standpoint, some of the things that you could do, we mentioned doing the whole foods plant-based diet. You can also do, I didn't mention this, which is some hydrotherapy. You can do what's called fomentations over the kidneys, where you can do an exchange between hot and cold. So you can take a hot towel, a hot moist towel, and put it over the lower back, which is where the kidneys would be, and lower to mid back, around that area. And you keep that heat on for 3 minutes, and then you take it off, and you can exchange it with ice cold, for about 30 seconds, and then you dry it off, and then you switch it again back with hot. And what happens when you do this contrast between hot and cold is it actually helps to reduce inflammation and accelerate healing. So that's one of the things that we would do as well to help people with kidney disease and other things. You could do contrast for a sprained ankle, and it will recover faster. It'll heal faster. You can do contrast, if somebody, just has an injury in an extremity, and it'll heal faster. And you can do the same thing for the kidneys. You can do hot and cold, and it will accelerate the healing and reduce the inflammation. You can also take anti-inflammatories. Someone said turmeric is awesome. Well, it really does help. You can use turmeric, you can use garlic, chia seeds, flax seeds. These are anti-inflammatory things that one could take internally. Also, other anti-inflammatory herbs are ginger, feverfew, Um, yeah, though I would say some others like white willow bark, but I wouldn't recommend that for in the context of kidney disease, especially because that has a similar mechanism as aspirin, and that can actually compromise the kidneys. So I wouldn't use white willow bark or Jamaican dogwood, but definitely ginger, feverfew, turmeric, those kind of things that we mentioned can help with the inflammation to the kidneys. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, great. How about one more, Jeremy? Tom Smith says, Chuck, get your adrenal function checked. It's attached to your kidneys, controls fight or flight response. So if kidneys help regulate heart rate, could be a hot mess waiting to happen. Ashwin, do you have a comment on that?
It sounds like someone was talking to Chuck. They were having an internal discussion, but yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. It definitely would help to get some labs done to know if it really is an adrenal issue or something else. Sometimes we can jump to conclusions. But the fight or flight response is definitely a stress response. So getting the stress under control, maybe taking a neutral bath or a hot bath, doing some deep breathing exercises. And I recommend talking to Jesus, having a time of prayer and just putting your cares on him. What do you have to lose? You know, what do you have to lose? It's free. He doesn't charge you anything, and you can put your burdens on him and rest and relax. If it is an adrenal thing, maybe your provider can help you figure that out, but it's hard to say just, off the bat here. So
yeah. And I know the LSR audience and we've become friends. You guys could do me no greater honor than to email me and ask and bug me to send you those Steps to Christ devotional videos and to read to you this book. We'll spend some time together that way, and you can hear just the voice of God to your soul from his word of love and affirmation and encouragement and healing. ScottRitsema@gmail.com. Please, it's not a bother. I'd be very happy to share that with you. It is a mission in life to help people feel that love of their God, as is Ashwin's, and he's done it. And I just thank God for that. And I thank you, Ashwin, for being our honored guest from Uchee Pines. And thanks to our sponsor, the Ringgold, Georgia event with Barbara O'Neill. Use that QR code to register for that event. Hope to see many of you there and many joining online as well. See you guys for our next LSR Live episode. We're going to talk to Dr. Dana Philisaint. She was a well-received popular guest we had previously, and back by popular demand. We will be together again at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central on Wednesday, January 22. So we'll see you all there. And again, Ashwin, thank you for being with us and just having the spirit of Jesus, the knowledge of the science, the experience of seeing people have God's healing in their life through his methods. And thanks to our producer. Yes, you're welcome. Thanks to our producer, Christian Digital Network. That's Jeremy, who I'm always talking to. From likes to lives changed. Please scan that QR code and subscribe to CDN YouTube channel. And we will see you all next time, January